Hello and welcome back to Gapeys Garden. Today we're going to be starting our TPS seeds. So TPS stands for True Potato Seeds. So these were saved from actual berries that were produced on my potatoes last year. So if you've ever seen your potato plants get these little berries, you can actually save the seeds from those and grow them. Now what you grow isn't going to necessarily look like the potato that you planted. So they are going to be hybrids or not really true to type. So if you planted a variety of different potatoes like I did last year, you will end up with a whole new variety. So last year I grew, I think, 3 or 4 different varieties, and these particular seeds came from my Satina potato, which is a white potato, and I'm really looking forward to trying these. Now I am a member of the Kenosha Potato Project group on Facebook, and there's a lot of TPS growers on there, and so that's where I've learned a lot about how to grow these and all the new varieties that you can develop. So I've looked there for some of my resources, and I've posted about my TPS seeds that I saved, and somebody on the group said that this particular variety can't self-pollinate, so it has to have another variety in order to produce potato berries. So I'm interested to see what variety that I grew last year that this might have crossed with. So this should be really interesting. And last year was my first year growing these, and there was a lot of people that were interested in learning more about it and how I grew them. So I thought I would do a video this year on the entire process. So today is seed starting day. Before we get started, I want to show you how I save the potato berry seeds. If you've ever saved tomato seeds before, it is the exact same process. So this is one berry that I got off of one of the potato plants this year. So I'm just going to kind of cut it a little bit in half just to open it up. And you can see there's some little tiny seeds in there. They're about the size of tomatillo seeds, which can also be saved this way. So I've got a little jar here with a little bit of water in the bottom, and I'm just going to squeeze the potato to get the seeds out. And so you'll have a little bit of gel come out with it, and you might have to kind of just squeeze it out and brush out any seeds. So there's probably 20 or so seeds in here, and they are very kind of covered in a gel. So this process is fermenting. So this will help release that gel from the seeds. So that is nice and clean. And we're gonna let this sit covered with a paper towel for about 3 days. And by then the gel should be released from the seeds. I like to write the date on the top of the napkin with a pen here, just so I remember when I started them. Now if you go too long, they'll start sprouting, and you don't want that. Okay, it's been about 5 days since our seeds have been soaking, and you might find some mold in there, which is totally normal. Now we just need to rinse them off and let them dry. I'm just gonna leave them in the colander for now and place them on a paper towel. And they should be fairly dry within a couple days, so I'll transfer them to a plate or a little bowl and let them dry a little bit longer before I store them. First thing we need to do is get our potting mix ready. Now, I usually use Jiffy seed starting mix. I've also started using Pro Mix. And this year I've added in some pit moss. So pit moss is an interesting product. It's actually made of paper products. It's a really interesting medium, but that is something I haven't used it by itself, but I have been mixing it in with my other potting soils. So I have here actually it's a blend of Pro Mix and seed starting mix and the pit moss, and I also added a little bit of extra perlite in here. But really, you can use any seed starting mix or potting soil. that you want to start seeds in. But this is just what I did, and I've already pre-moistened the soil. So it's always a good idea to pre-moisten your soil rather than trying to do that after you start your seeds. So I'm just gonna fill this up, and anytime I'm planting really small seeds like these, I like to just put them in a single cell container and then just sprinkle them on top. So I'm just lightly patting this down, pour those in my hand. So we've probably got, I don't know, maybe 20 or so seeds here. So I'm just gonna spread them out as evenly as possible on top of our mix here. Since these are so small, you generally don't want to bury them too deeply. So what I like to do is just take a little bit of potting mix, and I'm just gonna take some Pro Mix potting soil here and just sprinkle a very fine layer on top. And this is the dry mix, and then just pat that down. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come back and get a spray bottle with water in it and just moisten the top here. All right, and we're good to go. Now we're gonna go ahead and move this into a humid area. So I've got a humidity dome that will put this in until they germinate. This is the 1020 tray that I keep all of my stuff in that hasn't germinated yet, and I've got this humidity dome over it to hold in the moisture. So we're just gonna add our TPS tray right in here. I've also got some broccoli, kale, poppies, parsley, and I just started some alyssums. Now last year it took 5 days for the TPS to germinate, so we'll see how they do this year. So it's about 65 degrees in this room. If it's much colder, I would probably use a heat mat, but I think this temperature should be just fine. Good news, guys, we have our first little potato sprout. You can barely see it right there. So it took about 7 days for the first sprout to come up. And last year I mentioned it only took 5 days, and it's possible that I used a heat mat last year, but I really don't remember. But we're not using a heat mat this year, so 7 days at about 60 to 65 degrees. We're gonna go ahead and move our tray into the light because we don't want our little baby seedling to get leggy. So hopefully the others will sprout up here pretty soon, but we've got a spot all ready for it here next to our straw flowers. And this is the light setup that I'm using in my grow room. I've got two bulb fixture shop lights that I got from Lowe's or Home Depot, one of those, probably Lowe's. But I've just got fluorescent tubes in those. They're T8 bulbs, but I've got 2 for 6 of them going right now. And this is where I've got our potato seedlings there. So we've got them about 2 inches from the tops of the seedlings. Here is our tray of little potato seedlings. It's been exactly 2 weeks since I started these, and we've got about 25 seedlings that are up. So we got pretty good germination. I'm gonna leave these in this tray for another few weeks until they get a little bit bigger. I have been top watering these, and I'll switch to bottom watering once they get a little bit bigger and they start having more roots on the bottom. It's been 18 days since we started our little potato seedlings, and we've now got about 30 seedlings that have come up, and we're even starting to see some primary leaves coming out on a few of them. So I have started bottom watering these. So I just take this tray and stick it in another tray filled with water, and I can tell when it needs water just by lifting it. So right now it's pretty heavy because I just watered it. But if it's really light, then I know that it needs water. It's been a little over a month since we started our potato seeds, and we've got about 30 seedlings here, and it's time to get these repotted into some single cells. So I'm gonna be potting these up into these 4-cell trays and putting 1 seedling in each cell. Now, I don't need 30 of these plants, so the tough part is gonna be deciding which ones to keep and which ones to go into the compost. So we're gonna pick the biggest, strongest seedlings to repot, and the rest will be discarded. So we've got some really tiny ones down here. So these ones, I'm not gonna be keeping those, so that those are an easy decision, so I could just pull those out. But really what I'm gonna be doing, I'm just gonna take this entire tray and put it into this tray and see how bad the roots are. So here are the roots. They are pretty dense, but we do have some tools that we can use. Sometimes I like to use a toothpick to just tease the roots apart, and that works pretty well. And you want to do this when the potting soil isn't too wet. When it's really wet, it's very difficult to loosen up the roots. Another option is one of these tools here, which I got from Fairy Morse had sent to me. So this way you can, it's a little bit easier. You can do that, or you can just use your fingers. So I'm gonna just break this in half, and that will also be a good way. So this is how I do most of my seedlings. So we probably don't need any extra tools for this, actually. So then I just start from the end, and then I slowly try to pull on the seedling. If it doesn't come apart very easily, then I can loosen up the roots a little bit more and see if that helps. All right, so there we got a couple separated. So this one here is pretty small, and this one here is a pretty good size. So I'm gonna keep this larger one, and I'll set the smaller one aside. So I'm gonna be planting 12 of these, so I need to pick out the 12 best seedlings. So we've got this one here, that's a good option. And we can just keep splitting these in half until we have a smaller size clump to work with, and that will help separate them easier as well. So here's another one. All right, so we have our 12 seedlings, and I'm using a ProMix potting soil here. And what we need to do is just put a little hole in each one. I'm gonna use this tool here again, and just to create a little hole. Doesn't need to be too big because the roots aren't too spread out. And I did pre-moisten the potting soil. That's pretty important to make sure that they get a good start. And it's more difficult to try and water these if the potting soil is completely dry. So giving these more room to grow will actually help them to grow even faster. Once they run out of space for roots, they tend to slow down in growth. So we should actually see them get much bigger, much quicker now that they're in their own individual cells. All right, all done. So now we can go ahead and move these back under the lights and keep them watered, and we'll see how fast they grow. Our potatoes are about 7 weeks old now, and I'm actually down to 8, 9, 10 of them. I sold these two recently to a friend, so she's gonna give these a try. They are a little bit leggier than I would like to see, so I'm gonna get these repotted and actually move these outside because it's starting to warm up. I don't think we'll have any more freezing temperatures at night. So we're gonna be using the G&B Organics potting soil. I've already taken some of that and put it in this bucket, and I've already pre-moistened it and given it a good stir, so it's all ready to go. So we're gonna be potting these up into these 3.5 inch containers. So I'm just gonna fill one up here. If you see any big sticks like this, be sure to toss those out because we don't want those in there. Now I'm just gonna use my fingers to make a nice hole in the container here because we're gonna be planting these pretty deep. Now let's take a look at how these roots look. So all you need to do is push on the bottom of the container and it'll pop right out. And here is a look at our roots. They're not looking too bad, looks pretty good. So I'm just gonna break these up just a little bit. All right, now we're gonna plant that pretty deep. So we're gonna push that down into the hole, and then we'll just backfill with some more potting mix. So now that it's got more room to grow, we should hopefully see it start growing a little more quickly. There, looks pretty good. All right, we are all done repotting, and I'm thinking they are already looking much happier in these bigger containers. So we'll check back in a couple weeks and see how much they grow. Well, it's been a little while since the last update. As you can see, they have grown quite a bit. They are still in their 3.5 inch containers. I haven't really been fertilizing them. There is fertilizer in the potting soil, so I haven't really needed to. This one looks like it may have gotten a little bit sunburned, but the rest of them are looking really nice and probably about ready to go in the ground. It's been a super cold and wet spring here, but I'm gonna go ahead and get these in the ground here this week. The time has come. It is planting day. It's June 6th, and these are going in the ground. These potatoes are going into the in-ground bed. We have several raised beds, but I seem to have pretty good luck planting potatoes directly in ground. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's go ahead and take a look at the roots and see how root bound they are. Not too bad. They come apart really easily, so we're just going to break the roots up just a little bit before we plant them. And we are going to plant these pretty deep, pretty close to the top few leaves here. And since we have 6 plants, I'm going to be doing 2 rows of 3. Now to the planting hole this year, I'm going to be adding a few different things. We've got some all-purpose fertilizer. This is a 3-3-3 fertilizer from Ivy Organic. So I'm just going to grab a small handful of that and put that in the hole. And then I've also got some worm castings here, which is an all-purpose plant food. So I'm also going to put a small handful of that in there. And then we're going to just mix that up a little bit. All right, and then we're gonna stick our plant down in there. So I'm gonna remove the bottom few leaves because those are gonna go under the soil. And I'm just gonna be leaving that much showing. So it's a little bit crooked, but that is fine. We should get more potatoes to come across the stem. And we're just gonna bury that with our soil. All right, and you may have noticed I have some volunteers coming up around here. This is cilantro. I am leaving most of this to grow, but this one is a little too close to our potato, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull that one out. We've got plenty more that are still coming up. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and plant the rest. What we have here, we've got some little potatoes actually forming on this seedling. There's 2. This one is a pretty good size. So that is a really good sign that we're gonna get some potatoes out of these. Here we have another one with quite a few potatoes already forming on there. We got 1, 2, 3, another one right there. So that is looking really good. All right, our potatoes are in the ground, and now we just wait and see how they do. It's promising that they've got potatoes already forming. I found potatoes on nearly half of the potatoes that we planted. So I'll be reporting back throughout the season and we'll see how they do. It's been a while since the last potato update, and as you can see, it's kind of a jungle in here. The potatoes are in here somewhere, but the squash has really taken over this area. But we do still have potatoes here. So there's one there. Here's another one, it might be the same one actually. And we are starting to see some flowers. So the flowers here are white, which I believe is the same color as the Satina variety, so that isn't giving me any hint of what it could have crossed with. But we'll have to wait another month or so to harvest, and we'll have to see what those spuds look like. Okay guys, it is the moment of truth. Our potatoes are starting to die back, especially these ones here. You can see the leaves are all yellow and pretty much dead. The one there in the middle is still fairly green, as is the one behind it. But we're definitely going to be harvesting these 2 here today. I think I'll wait a little bit longer for the others. I don't think these 2 on the end got any flowers. I'm not seeing any flower buds. So I'm not sure these ones are going to be as good as the others, but we'll dig them up and see what we ended up with. So I'm going to start by just pulling on the vine here, see if we can get any potatoes to come up. Nope, nothing came up, so we're gonna have to start digging. Hopefully there's some potatoes in there. Oop, there's one. Looks just like a normal potato, looks a lot like the Satina. Not very big. All right, so not too many potatoes out of that one. Now the TPS grown potatoes normally are pretty small, so what a lot of people do is then save these potatoes to grow again the next year. So let's go ahead and try this next one. All right, well, it looks like that's about all we're gonna get out of these 2 plants. So we're gonna wait a few more days to harvest the ones in the back, but we'll hopefully see a little more spuds out of those. All right, it is October 10th and we've had a pretty dry October, so it is time to harvest our last 2 TPS potatoes. So this one here was probably the biggest of all of them. It had several vines, so let's see. Hopefully we've got a bigger harvest than the last few we harvested. It's a little bit better harvest than our last few, but still we got some pretty good sized ones actually. Not too bad. We'll see how this last one did. I think that's all we're gonna get out of this potato, and it's interesting. Let me grab the other potatoes we just harvested. So it's interesting because all these potatoes were grown from seeds from the same potato berry, and look at how different they are. The second one we harvested has a really smooth, light colored skin, while the first one we harvested is actually a darker skin and a little more rough. So I find that kind of interesting. You would think that from the same potato berry, all the potatoes would look the same, but that is not the case. So I will probably save a few of these potatoes to try growing next year. I hope you enjoyed seeing how I grew these potatoes from potato berry seeds, and give it a try yourself. You never know what you're gonna end up with. Thanks for watching, and talk to you again soon. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.